James, it's lovely to see you again. I only saw you a few hours ago, didn't I?
We've got to stop meeting like this, Maria.
I know people are going to start talking. So let's move on quickly. James, tell our audience how you got interested in creativity. Where did it come from?
Well, first of all, I believe that we're all born with this unlimited creativity, but it often gets knocked out of us over the course of our schooling and our education. People, great speakers like Sir Ken Robinson, can spoke about this so well. Where I kind of got interested in the topic of creativity, I guess, as something that could possibly be spoken about was first of all going and seeing, probably when I was 14, 15 years of age, a gentleman called Edward de Bono. And he was a very, very gifted communicator and kind of almost like a professor, university don type professor. But the thing that really impressed me was the ideas that he shared about creativity, and I was passionate about that, but also the way that he shared them. He used a lot of visuals, diagrams, acetates. People remember acetates. And I remember thinking at that point, wow, imagine what it must be like to have a life like that, where you get to travel around the world talking about something you're really passionate about, in his case, creativity. Fast forward, I started working and managing the careers of a lot of high-profile rock stars. My father's a musician, my grandfather's a musician, my wife is a musician. And very early in my 20s or so, I started managing their careers or different artists' careers. I then had opportunity to work with members of Rolling Stones, lots of Grammy award-winning music artists, specifically either on the management or the agency side. And then 2010, I moved to California to work in the kind of Silicon Valley world, where what I was doing is for some of these great brands, these great artists, I was creating their online academies, their online schools, so they could teach whatever it was, whether it was Nathan East, who's a bass player with Daft Punk, and Eric Clapton teaching bass, or whoever the teacher was. And so that was my introduction. But the thing I always kind of felt, and I kind of remember feeling this at one point, was early in my life I was a musician. I played drums myself when I was younger. And that sensation of being on stage and that joy that you have communicating with the audience, and that energy you have with the audience. And then probably when I went to college, I kind of went backstage and behind the scenes. And I was the guy building all these brands and these stars and putting these massive tours together. And I got to a point, I remember thinking, I really miss the stage. I really miss that ability to communicate. And so in late 2017, early 2018, I was just getting asked to go and speak on stages again, but talking about creativity as a topic, and what I learned from spending time with these startup companies, these great tech companies in California, as well as the music artists. So that ended up bringing me back on stage and getting to do the job that I do today.
Isn't that amazing? That's sort of like full circle. And I actually had the pleasure of working with Edward de Bono, and you're absolutely right. He did use the OHP projectors we had to get for him as part of his tech. Yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. That's incredible. I love that. Tell me what kind of companies and industries bring you in now to speak about creativity, and what challenges are they trying to solve?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, the challenges, most often they're things like they're looking to unlock the creativity of their people, which is primarily around improving collaboration. They're looking for their people to break down those silos, maybe that senior partner in Tokyo, trying to get them to work better with the team in New York, for example. So there's the unlocking creativity, so you have all these new ideas coming out to grow the business. Other one is accelerating innovation. Creativity and innovation are linked, but they're not the same thing. So the way to think about it is basically creativity is about bringing new ideas to the mind. Innovation is about bringing new ideas to the world. Innovation is slightly more process orientated. So other companies bring me because they want to accelerate innovation. They want to do that. And probably the third reason is they want to adapt to change. And this is a big thing in my kind of take on stuff, which is a little bit unusual. I'm not a classic kind of creativity speaker, because I blend creativity with how we can augment our creativity with exponential technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics. And so I talk about the augmentation of human creativity. And this is the bit then I often end up sharing stages with futurists, for example. So the kind of companies that bring me in, or the industries maybe, I've had a great pleasure, working with a lot of the global Fortune 500 companies, My clients include, let's say, pharmaceutical companies like Roche, GlaxoSmithKline, Johnson and Johnson, a lot of tech companies, as you would imagine, companies like, but some of the ones you might not have heard of that are growing incredibly fast, the new unicorns, companies like Globant, for example, the big consulting firms, the Accentures of this world, a lot of financial services, banking, Visa, a lot of banks, in the First Abu Dhabi Bank, for example, and then kind of unusual industries that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being like super kind of creative industries, like logistics. UPS is one of my clients, and they're always coming up with very creative ways on how to get the vaccines out into these remote locations, for example. So those are the big ones, I would say. Financial services, banking, technology, pharma, healthcare, and things like the logistics. And then moving a little bit, and this is strangely, I didn't think this would be a big industry for me, but has ended up being a big industry, is anything in professional services. So I work with a number of the top 50 global law firms, the Hogan Lovells of this world, for example, Womble Bond Dickinson's, also the EYs, the big accountancy firms, because they're interested in creativity, but from a different perspective. You don't think of accountants as being creative, but really what they're looking to do is they're wanting to ensure that their partners are collaborating really well, and also that they're collaborating with their clients to come up with really interesting strategies, new ways of doing things. So those are the reasons I get brought in.
That's fantastic. That's an amazing range of organizations. And it's interesting because so the challenges they're facing are, you've mentioned some of them. I hadn't thought about the challenge of, getting vaccines to remote areas. So you do need a creative solution to that. I like that. And also, I suppose you need to be creative in order to cope with what we've been coping with in the last 2 years. I like the phrase augmented creativity, although your topic, of course, is super creativity, which is that augmented, which is the mix of, as you said, the AI with the human to create that super creativity. Whereas many of us have thought about creativity as keeping it separate from the AI. But you believe that if we combine it, it becomes exponential. Have I got that right?
Yeah, and it's actually evolved, that term super creativity. I remember coming up with it. My wife and I, we were doing an event, I think it was in California, in Laguna Beach, a beautiful place. And it's funny, with ideas, I don't know whether you have this, Maria, you rarely get them when you're sitting at your desk. Only 18% of your ideas are going to happen when you're at your desk. Most of the time they happen when you're out walking the dog on a beach or doing something else. And so for me, I remember walking along this beach in kind of Laguna Beach there, and thinking about this idea of super creativity, how we can augment our creativity. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Ron Kaufman, who's a great customer service speaker. And at that point I said super creative. And he said, no, you should make it a verb, super creativity. And because it was a bit more inclusive as a term. And then as I started working more and more, and you only discover this when you're out speaking with clients, what I actually found was almost at that bit, the human plus the machine part is one side of super creativity. It's the sexy part, it's the cool part. But actually, I talk about these two other. So there's human plus machine is a type of super creativity, but also human plus human, or what we call as creative pairs. So many of the great businesses you'll see often have two founders to them, two co-founders, or in a business, you might have a mentor and a mentee relationship. So if you look at lots of geniuses, they don't do it on their own. Whether it's the sciences, technology, whatever the industry is, there's always someone else. And those creative pairings can take different types. So that's another type of super creativity, where you can pair up with someone, human plus human, and do amazing things together, and you complement each other in a different way. And then the third type is human to the power of X, which is creative collaborative teams. And this is about how you break down silos in organizations, how you create what we call a sense of psychological safety, a great term invented by Professor Amy Edmondson from Harvard. It's that ability in an organization where everyone feels that they have a voice to put forward their ideas, to challenge other people's ideas as well. And so that kind of brings it into a different, and it's interesting, post-pandemic, that bit there, which is that team part, the collaboration bit, that is the bit that I'm getting the most positive responses around my speaking and my workshops, because that's the bit where We've all kind of struggled, Zoom and technologies are amazing, but that ability to be to really have a deep relationship with other members of your team, to collaborate at that higher level. And this is where we come into high functioning, cross-functional teams now as well. So that's what super creativity kind of started as, just like human plus machine, but it's encompassed anything that can augment your own human creativity, which is often other people.
Lovely. I like that. My place is the bath.
Yeah.
That's where I get which is a problem, because you can't write things down in the bath. The water gets a bit wet, the paper gets a bit wet. So that's a struggle. So I have to then try and remember, and now, the memory's not so good.
Now let me ask you this question. So this is an interesting one, because I asked this question at a lot of events, where do you get your best ideas? And the morning shower comes up very, very often. And there's a reason behind that. So are you a morning bath person, or are you an evening bath person?
I'm both. I like to do both. I'm super clean, not super creative. I'm super clean. So I do like my baths, which is probably not very ecologically friendly, but I do like my baths.
But here's the thing. So I can tell you what's going on there is, overnight, you might have been thinking the day before about a challenge or a problem you're trying to solve. Overnight, your brain kind of winds down. Your subconscious continues to work on the idea. Then in the morning, your brain is fuzzy, it's unwound, you're open to unconventional thoughts. Alpha waves are rippling through your brain, directing your attention inwards to remote associations that emanate from the right hemisphere. Also, the bit of the brain that says that's a stupid idea, that hasn't woken up yet when you're in that morning bath and morning shower. So that's why you often get some of your best ideas in that morning shower, that bath. Likewise, where you might find it in the evening. Some people get their best ideas in the wee small hours later in the evening. It's different for everyone. Everyone has different times. Some people have it twice in the day, like yourself, maybe in the morning and later in the evening. So it's very important you understand from yourself, when is it that time when you have almost that flow state, ideas come to you, things just start, you want to use that time well.
I think it's probably because you're disconnected to technology and you're relaxing, and I think that's probably it. So that could be it. It could be my aromatherapy oils. But anyway, let's come back to your speaking, because we're digressing a bit here. Which are the kinds of events then and audiences that benefit most from hearing about super creativity?
Well, I personally love speaking to people that don't consider themselves to be creative. That's why I probably speak a lot to big accountancy firms. Only about 40% of people will consider themselves to be creative. The vast majority of people don't consider themselves to be creative. When I then explain to them what creativity can really be, that figure often changes, and I actually can share them. In fact, we can even measure it when I do workshops. I can measure a team's creativity at the start of the meeting using something called the tolerance test. I can teach them some tools, and by the end of it, we can measure their creativity levels again, and we'll actually see them increase. So I love doing those events where you've got a mix of people. Really, I would say I would get booked by a company who's like a creative ad agency, because they all consider themselves to be creative anyway. They don't feel that they often need any help. In terms of the sizes of audience is an interesting one, because there's a joy, and this may be the performance side of me, of going up. I was talking to a client yesterday about doing an event for them in Eastern Europe, in Poland, and it's 7,000 people. So there's that great joy. You kind of do the Freddie Mercury thing a little bit when you're on that stage. It's a different energy. You need a different kind of, you're using your body, you're blocking, you're doing more kind of craft in that type of presentation. And that's great. And you can influence large numbers of people. But equally valid, perhaps maybe even more so, is when I go and do those very small events. So these are the 50, 60 persons. I'm actually doing one, I think, in 2 weeks' time. There's 9 people in the room, but they're all the country CEOs of this large organization. Now, the interesting thing you do, you have a different kind of conversation about creativity and innovation with a group like that, but things are able to get done. Because really then what you're talking about doing is you're talking about building a culture of creativity in the organization. When you change that terminology to building a culture of service or a culture of creativity, and they say this needs to be part of our DNA, this creativity, innovation needs to be part of our values as an organization, then that client will often then bring me in to work with all the other parts of the organization. So I don't mind. I mean, I actually personally, probably my favorite, I would say, is a room of 150 people. And I love doing these blended bit of keynote, and then we maybe have a coffee break, and then I do a breakout, and we do almost like a workshop style. I love that. That's fantastic. And that's just in the real world. But obviously, we all know we've been living in virtual times the past 2 years. And so, I've kind of adapted to that. I'm very lucky. I have a great studio here. And so I actually kind of almost doubled the number of speaking engagements I did, because you can just do more in a day. That's not going to continue like that, obviously. But with virtual, you can do some things that are slightly better that you can do, and other things are a little bit more challenging. And I certainly feel, going back and doing live events, in-person events now, there's a different energy. People are excited to be back together again.
Absolutely. Gets to hug some people. Fantastic. So tell me, because obviously, I mean, your surname's Taylor, so I'm expecting that you tailor things, but I'm expecting you to not only tailor, but also to be very creative when you work with your clients, because you talk about super creativity.
Yeah.
So how do you work with a client then to prepare a session? Because I'm imagining you're not going to do the same thing for everybody. You're going to be creative, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, this is the way that I think about it. If you're going clothes shopping, you can either go to a shop and you can buy that suit or that dress off the peg. You will know exactly what it looks like. You can try it on the shop. You know how it's going to be. There's very little risk in that for doing that as a customer. But for many of my clients, the experience that they really want with me is more like when you're going and having a tailor-made dress or a suit made. You're going to Savile Row in London. And if you're doing that, it's bespoke. It's made for you. There's no other suit that's going to be like that. It's made for you. Now, from my perspective as a speaker, that puts some additional things I have to do in order to make that work. For example, I am not the kind of speaker who's going and giving 2 or 3 keynotes a day. That's not me. There's other amazing friends of ours, amazing speakers that can do that, because they have a type of way of speaking that does that. For me, I treat working with a customer like I'm measuring them I'm creating the most beautiful creative piece, something for them to have. So what I'm doing is, on that first maybe discovery call, I'm asking a series of questions, and then if we decide we're a good match for each other, then we move forward. And then I have a document I send out. They fill that document. That tells me the basic things I need to know about the event, who the audience objectives. This allows me, when I jump on the first of usually 3 pre-event calls, that first one is I'm able to I don't have to cover that stuff. We've already covered it in the document, so I can get much deeper, much quicker with that client. So I'm asking them a different set of questions. What is keeping, what is keeping your team up at 2 a.m. in the morning just now? What are the big things that are going on in your industry? I'm kind of going a few steps further with them. What's, some of the challenges. So that's almost like what I'm doing is if you go and have a handmade suit made, that's the first, where they're just kind of measuring you up. You're just getting the basic measurements. Then what I will do is I will go away. I will do separate research. Some clients will have me sign NDAs because they want to, especially if it's innovation, they want me to look at certain types of new things that are in the works. They don't want to have public. So I'm happy I do that. And then I go and I basically start crafting the first version of, let's say if it's a keynote. And then we come online, we come and do a virtual, and I actually walk them through the first fitting of their keynote. And I walk them and said, okay, this is what it's going to go, and this is where we're going, this is the shape of it, and this is where we're going to go here, and this is the emotional journey we're going to take the audience on, and this is the bit we're going to, and at that point, it's not me saying this is how it is. I'm saying, okay, this is a co-creation process now. What resonates with you? I said, oh, that bit there, we had an example here, and I think this would be great if you spoke to that partner or that VP there, because he was doing something or she was doing something around that. And so I'll have conversations with other members across the organization of their team, so I can pull in that story that maybe the organization, people in that room didn't even know, and it's from their own company. So I'm a storyteller. I can tell that story on behalf of that person if they don't consider themselves a storyteller. So we do that first fit. We kind of go back and forth. We're like, we like that. Could we have a bit more of that, a bit less of this? And then I'll do a second fitting, which is pretty much there. It's basically what it is. And then the third fitting is often where we're doing the technical check of some sort, on the day if I'm traveling to a place. It might be the night before, I'll do a technical check, or and we're just going to go through the final things. And at that point, I'm doing, if it's an in-person, I'm feeling at the stage, the space, doing what we call blocking as a speaker, knowing the bit, if you're using a camera, so if you've got multiple cameras for a screen, what is my camera, my close-up shot? So when I deliver that key important line, I want to be having my eye in that camera, because it might be a virtual event, a hybrid event. You might have people watching it virtually, and I want to be making eye contact with them at that stage as well. So these are all the things, the craft bit. But as I say, you go into this is what we call creativity of risk, not creativity of certainty. At the very beginning, you don't know exactly what you're going to get, but we're going to co-create this together. And the highest praise I can get is when someone says to me, we've never worked with a speaker like this before. I had this, we've never worked with a speaker like this that's customized to this level for us. It almost feels like you're a member of our organization. That's a high praise for me, because that means I'm getting my ego out of the way and I'm client-centric. I'm focused on their challenges and I'm bringing everything I can bring to that game.
You live up to the name Taylor, because you're absolutely right. I've been in this industry for a long time, as you know, and there aren't many people that would go to that level of tailoring and customization. Do you involve machines at all when you're preparing your speeches?
Yes, I do. Sometimes I won't necessarily let the client know that I'm doing this. Clients have different feelings about it, especially if it's an event for, let's say, 100 plus people. And especially, I would say, really great if it's an association or trade association type event. I will use an artificial intelligence to analyze the audience in the room before I go and speak to that room. Now, the reason I do this is I want to understand the psychometrics of the room. I want to understand, if I'm going to speak in a room, this is an audience, they value trust very highly. So I'm going to have to use more social proof, more case studies, for example. Or this is an audience that is kind of authority challenging. So I want to be a bit of a contrarian in my speech. So basically what this does is companies like IBM Watson, the number of companies that do this now, all I need is that organization's, say, Twitter account, if it's an association, or if it's maybe if it's a smaller gathering, I just ask them for a couple of people in the audience, the key people, maybe people that are representative of that organization. And then I will go and do the research and I will find anything that they've written publicly. So all I need is 1,000 words that someone has spoken or written, and I can give that to an artificial intelligence and it will combine all these things. And it basically gives me a psychometric map of the people in that room. It tells me this is their needs, their values, their want systems, 72 different factors. And so the impact for the audience is not just like, wow, James, he really this is a really powerful topic. He's a great speaker, but James really gets us. He really understands it. I'm hitting their hot buttons, but I'm using technology to help augment me to do this. But once again, the AI is not going to write my speech for me. It's not doing that, but it's just making me a better communicator. And usually when I share this, let's say, especially to sales groups, the first question in the Q&A is like, what is that technology you're using? Because I want to be able to use that so I can analyze that decision maker before I meet them on that next sales call. And I share that with the audience as well.
And I know, because I asked exactly that question, because I was in the audience and you did it, and I was just absolutely blown away. It was brilliant. Yeah. I'd never known anybody else to do it before, so it was really cool. And
there was a real kicker in the story recently. I was doing an event in Ras Al Khaimah in the United Arab Emirates for a client, a bank, and I was telling this, I was sharing about this as well as an idea, something they could do. And because I'd gone in and I'd actually flown in the night before, and I'd spent some time really networking with people in the organization. And I actually found a young new recruit to the organization who had come from IBM, from the IBM AI side. So he knew exactly how all this stuff works. So what I did is in my presentation, and I said, and people was like, what is this? How can we do this? How can we do this? I said, I can't remember what his name was. Christoph, where are you, Christoph? Put your hand up. You have someone in your organization who knows exactly how to build this for you. Everyone go and speak to Christoph after this, because he's going to build it in your organization. And poor old Christoph got deluged by that we're going to build it for their company. So sometimes people don't know what's actually in the organization, the talents that are there.
That's true. Absolutely true. And the bigger the organization, the harder it is to know. So absolutely true. Tell me, what sort of trends are you seeing with regards to clients in terms of conferences and meeting themes around this topic of creativity?
I'm seeing a couple of things. I think collaboration is probably the main thing I'm seeing. For many of my clients, I would say in North America, they are coming to me with a slightly different challenge because they're seeing the Great Resignation happen, and they're asking their people, what do you want to the kind of what do you want to do? How do you want us to invest in you in terms of your learning and development? And many of them are coming back and they're saying, we want you to help us develop our creativity. There's loads of studies now showing that, especially this younger generation coming in, or any generation under 30, they're more likely to go and work for organizations that value their creativity and will give them the opportunity to express that creativity. And they're much more likely to go and work in organizations where creativity is part of a culture in the organization, and they're working with colleagues who also have this culture of creativity as well. So for that reason, I'm seeing a lot of those companies who are coming to me because their people are just crying out for this. It's just they want this. They might not use the word creativity. They might use a different word for it. But that's a key one. So collaboration, creativity. The other one I guess I see is a kind of, which is a broader one, which is kind of adapting to change. And there's Yuval Noah Harari, who I think you brought with as well, a great speaker, and wrote Sapiens and the 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He spoke about this, basically 4 skills, soft skills, that we need to develop to take us through this century that we're in just now. And those top 4 skills, and there's loads of research that's borne this out: creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. These are the 4 skills. So my thing comes in, I focus primarily around the collaboration and the creativity piece, sometimes touch on a little bit on the critical thinking, about how if you have a bunch of people, you have a bunch of ideas, how you take those ideas and then critically assess those ideas to say which ones we're going to take forward and prototype. But basically those creativity and collaboration, if you're someone that's listening to just now and you're the leader of your organization, you're an HR, learning and development people for your business, and you are not providing some type of training on creativity and collaboration, you are missing a trick here, because this is what they're going to need, regardless of whether they work for your organization or other organizations. Start doing, whether you bring someone like me in or someone else. There's loads of other great speakers and trainers around this topic, but really this is something you want to be doing now, because this is the human stuff. This is the stuff that machines aren't going to do for us.
That's good news. That's good news. There's something we can do that machines can't do. That's a relief. Tell me, so obviously you've worked in, I think it's 25 countries in 2019 and probably more virtually. Is there a difference in terms of how people react to creativity? Are certain nationalities more creative, or do you have to alter the way you deliver the content to different countries? Are some more open than others about creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's cultural things. I would say as a speaker, especially as a global speaker, the stories that I tell and the case studies I tell are global stories. I see this from maybe from American speakers, because they primarily speak in the United States. Often the stories that they tell are of American companies, the Teslas, the Elon Musks. And I find, I mean, those are great stories, but after a while, they're kind of a bit boring, especially if you're speaking to a global audience where you've got all people coming together from a company. So I tend to use a lot of global examples, talking about things that are going on in China and Latin America, just unusual things. When it comes to the creativity, basically everyone is born creative. There's no difference there. We're all born with this unlimited creativity. Different education systems in different countries knock it out of us in different ways. So I would say, if I'm speaking to, say, Indian companies, their education systems more kind of rote learning. It's changed, actually. It changed in the past 5 years. They've really started to open up more a broader type of learning, but that's a little bit more challenging. If I'm speaking to Western, North American audiences, they're very much more open up to creativity. If I speak to, let's say, audiences in China, Japan, Eastern Asia, I have to tweak things slightly because they have often a conception of creativity. If you were to say to many people there, do you consider yourself to be creative? the notion of creativity, the Western notion of creativity that we often have is a little bit different. And so I'll give you an example, and there's a reason for this. In the West, our concept of creativity comes from the fact that we are a Judaic Christian background for many cultures in these places. So in the tradition of those religions, creativity is something that comes from nothing. The world was created in 7 days, for example, in the Christian tradition. In the Eastern Asian tradition, they come from a Confucius or a Buddhist background. So they believe that something doesn't come from nothing. It's always there. It's just being remixed, reorganized in some way. So for those audiences, I really can speak more this idea that creativity is something it's not that it's come from nothing, but we're kind of reconstructing things in different ways. We're taking things and it's like a remix of different things. And when you express creativity in that way, they go, yeah, I am totally creative. I'm always borrowing ideas from that thing and then thinking about how it applies to that. So that's the big difference on creativity. And then the other thing, which is just I guess a craft piece, is if I'm speaking to audiences where English isn't their first language. If I'm speaking in Latin America, my pace of my speaking will slow probably by about 20% or so, because at that point, they're often listening using translation, and different languages translate at different speeds. And so initially when I'll start, I'll talk to the translator or the interpreter. I'll say, these are the kind of important words, or this is when I'm going to get to a joke. Does this work in this language? How is it going to work? And I'm also listening. I'll have a headset in and I'm listening to him or her translate sometimes in their language, even just for the first part, because that gets me into the rhythm of their language. And I know, at this point I can speak at my regular pace, or maybe I need to slow it down a little bit or change things. So that's just kind of stuff that you get to learn as a speaker when you speak to more global audiences.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't have something else in my ear when I'm then trying to think of my next sentence. Oh my goodness, I couldn't do that at all. I like the fact that you said remix for the Eastern Asian audiences, because also makes me think about your music background. So that fits really nicely. So listen, finally, because we've had a lot of your time and I really appreciate it, I'm expecting again another creative answer from you. I'm putting you under a lot of pressure. What else can you do? What other value do you bring in addition to a keynote? And again, I'm expecting a super creative answer here.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's been so fascinating about this time we've been going through, because needs have changed from clients. And so initially, I thought I would just start out really as a keynote, as a more classic keynote speaker, where you're going in, you're the opening keynote speaker, or you're the closing speaker. And then if you put the customer at the middle, the client in the middle, and you ask them, how else can I help? What else can I do? Then all these other things come up, but then it's up to you to decide whether that's right for you or not. So I would say that the very obvious one is the workshops. So many clients will come to me and say, initially we bring you for a keynote, and I'll say, how are you bringing your people together? What are your workshop type of things? And then often on the same day or the day after, I will then do a workshop for them as well. And that's a really easy one to do. And it's a more kind of creative thinking, creative tools. I'm teaching them things, and we're getting them to collaborate together and break down silos. Other ones that I've been asked to do more recently is, I would say, kind of more virtual training more broadly. So, and something I didn't expect to do, which I ended up doing a little bit last year, is virtual emceeing, which came out of completely nowhere. And I'd run a lot of online summits before. And because I'm very comfortable with the technology, I'm very comfortable with a director speaking in my ear and all those things that are kind of going on and having that background. It was just, I kind of moved into it. And it's not my main thing, but there's a real pleasure of being like, say, a virtual MC for what we call client advisory boards. So this is where a client will bring their top 50 client customers into a very private type of virtual space. They might bring in a keynote speaker, but really what they're doing is they're having a conversation with their top clients about how they can do things. Now, these are very obviously confidential discussions that you're having, but my job there is to be the glue to hold things together, to write the script for this whole event, to ask questions, to be, the facilitator, the moderator of this. So that requires lots of different skills, and it's a little bit of a blend. And so it's not my main thing, but I'm actually been enjoying it doing some of them just now, and because it kind of use a different skill set. But I would say keynotes, workshops, and the virtual MC, and now even, you know, hologram, which is kind of mad, but now starting to do the hologram keynotes, and that opens you up to another area.
There you are, you're a super speaker, you see. It's James plus technology equals super speaker. How fantastic. James, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again. I hope you've enjoyed yourself and it wasn't too painful.
No, my pleasure. And please reach out to the team, and love to come and speak at one of your future events.
Lovely, thank you. And thank you everybody for listening to The Speaker Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, and you can keep up with future episodes on the Speakers Associates website, which is speakersassociates.com, or your favorite podcast app. And if you would like to invite James to speak at your next event, please get in touch with Speakers Associates in plenty of time to book him, so you won't be disappointed, because you can hear he's very busy and he needs time to prepare for every session as well. I will see you all next week. Thank you for listening.